We flew EasyJet from Manchester to Venice and then had an approximately 90-minute car transfer to Trieste, where our cruise will actually begin. We have 3 nights in the Savoia Excelsior Palace Hotel. Our room faces the sea and the cruise terminal, where Riviera will be berthed in a couple of days' time. Just 2 minutes walk from the hotel is the Piazza Unità d'Italia, the main square of Trieste and the largest square in Europe that faces directly onto the sea. Here we find the Café degli Specchi, which we patronised every day for breakfast and sometimes coffee. Across the square is Trieste's branch of Harry's Bar. The Molo Audace is a good place to take in the views of the centre of Trieste. The Grand Canal of Trieste used to be longer than it is now. James Joyce lived in Trieste for 15 years, hence the statue and cafes named after him. This giant coin is a monument to the Empress Maria Theresa. The parish church of the Blessed Virgin dates back to the 13th century. The 2nd century Roman theatre was only rediscovered at the beginning of the 19th century. Next door is a car park with a lift that takes you up to the top of San Giusto Hill. This is where we find the Cathedral of San Giusto. It was built between the 9th and 11th centuries on the site of a Roman temple, and is actually 2 separate churches which have later been joined together. This central nave is what joins the 2 separate churches together. The rose window dates from the 14th century, when the 2 churches were joined. This mosaic over the central apse is modern, but the mosaics over the 2 outer apses date from the 12th to 13th centuries and are in the Byzantine style. The area outside was the Roman Forum, and towering above it is the fortress that was built in the 15th century when Trieste became part of the Austrian Empire. On a good day, the views from up here are great. The green roof is our hotel. Back down in the piazza, things are looking rather damp. Early next morning and our ship is in. The view from our cabin balcony, and from the ship's bridge camera. And so the cruise begins, and our first stop is Zadar, Croatia. The cruise terminal is in the commercial port a little way outside the town, so you either have to get the shuttle bus or, as we did, share a taxi. The Church of St. Donatus dates from the 9th century and is now used as a concert hall. It stands on the Roman Forum. Strolling along the well-maintained promenade, we have a view of some of Croatia's islands. We had a very nice lunch at this sushi restaurant in the background here. Continuing our stroll past the sea organ, which was very melodious today. We waited here by the Greeting to the Sun for our shuttle bus to take us back to the ship. The next stop is Split. It took us about 20 minutes or so to walk from the new cruise port past the ferry port to the old town. The old town is built inside the walls of the palace built by the Emperor Diocletian for his retirement. We stopped for our coffee break in one of the cafes which form part of the walls. We enter the old town through the cellars of Diocletian's palace, which are now a tourist attraction in their own right. Last time we were here, there were market stalls. St. Domnius's Cathedral is built in what was Diocletian's mausoleum, built in the 4th century. The bell tower dates from the 12th century. This was the entrance to the Emperor's private apartments, which were on the southern side of the palace facing the sea. And just inside is this vestibule. Over the centuries, many buildings have been constructed in parts of the palace, reusing much of the stonework. One of the 4 gates to the palace, known as the Golden Gate. At the end of our trip, we managed to persuade a taxi driver to take us back to the cruise terminal. Our next port is Dubrovnik. We have been here several times before, but in recent years, Dubrovnik has become very busy. Even though the number of cruise ship visits has been curtailed recently, and in fact there was only one other ship in with us this day, we decided to stay on board and have a relaxing day at sea on land. Next stop, Corfu. We took the shuttle bus into town, which dropped us off in front of the old fortress. We crossed the esplanade towards the town and stopped in a cafe for excellent coffee and croissant. Then we just went for an amble round the old town. Very pleasant temperature and not crowded. According to the inscription, this was built in 1680 and renovated in 1728. The next stop is Catacolo, from which we will visit Olympia. Catacolo has plenty of cafes and restaurants, but they're of no interest to us today because we are on a tour to Olympia. The Gymnasion was an open-air training area for the athletes. The Palestra was the wrestling ground, which was a courtyard surrounded by a colonnade, which was divided into several rooms. The Romans built baths here, and just to prove it, here's a mosaic they left behind. The Hotel of Leonidas provided accommodation for those who could afford it during the course of the Games, 2 weeks every 4 years. The Temple of Zeus, the reconstructed column, gives us an idea of the scale of these buildings. The Temple of Hera. This was the fountain of Herodes Atticus, dating from the Roman era. The stadium, and lots of visitors just can't resist the temptation to give it a go. The funerary monument to Philip of Macedon, completed by his son Alexander the Great. Next day is a sea day before we arrive in Valletta, Malta. We are berthed at the cruise terminal in the Grand Harbour. The MSC ship over on the other side is in dry dock. These days the dockside buildings look very smart. We walked for about a quarter of an hour or so from the cruise terminal to the Upper Baraka lift. This takes us up to the higher level of the Upper Baraka Gardens and the Old Town. From the top we have a good view of our ship and indeed the whole of the Grand Harbour. We walk through the gardens to emerge into the Old Town. Jean de Valette, the Grand Master of the Knights of St. John, who founded the city of Valletta, which is now named after him. Continuing our walk in the general direction of St. John's Co-Cathedral. We stopped for our coffee break at one of these cafes. The queue for the cathedral was too long in the current heat, so we moved on. Republic Square and the Grand Master's Palace. Time to head back, and the main shopping street is very busy now. Our next port is Messina in Sicily, and we are going to take the ship's tour to Taormina on your own. As we leave the coach park, we have the chance to rent a Ferrari by the hour. Just inside the old town is Taormina Cathedral, which is described as a fortress church because of its crenellated walls. It was built around 1400 on the site of a smaller, older church. We stopped for our coffee break here in the cathedral square. Then we set off along Corso Umberto, which is Taormina's main street. The main square is where you come for the great sea views. We can see part of the Greco-Roman theatre. The 17th century Church of St. Catherine, and this is where we decided to turn round and head back. Next morning we're anchored off Sorrento. We wake to a view of Capri from our balcony. This is the last full day of our cruise, and we've been here quite a bit before, so we're staying on board and enjoying the views of Vesuvius and the coastline, and getting ready to disembark tomorrow. We arrive in Rome before dawn. We managed to disembark earlier than expected, and our pre-booked taxi is waiting for us. So we arrive at the airport with several hours to spare. Terminal 3 departures, we find this very nice cafe where we can sit for all the time we need with some nice food.